Land I plan to use for the permaculture garden. We can not use anything here as it will be covered by the shade of the roof and it will prevent sunlight from permeating. However, this is more than enough land and it'll most likely take it'll probably take around a day to finish. My action plan has not been completely finished by this point. However, we have mulch to be used. Mulch will help retain moisture in the soil, as well as the mulch breaks down, it'll form fertilizer for the farm as it grows, and then once the farm is fully matured, it will actually self-sustain and it'll fertilize itself. We will have to plant perennial plants, which are plants that will permanently stay in this garden and will produce fruits every around 2 to 3 times a year. And we will also have annual plants, which will be swapped every couple of months after they're done growing.
So due to time constraints, and since we had to start this project a little bit late due to cyclones and then starting in DLP, I've chosen to dumb down the project a little bit. Instead of being from there to there on the plot will this little plot has been covered up. So what I'm going to do right now first is take out all the weeds. This is a plot that was actually being worked on by my dad until certain circumstances, especially like COVID, he couldn't come here and fix it. So basically, all the mulch and compost we use needs to be replaced with clean compost and mulch. So what I'm going to do after I finish pulling up all these green weeds all around the edges, I'm going to take a rake and I'm going to remove the first layer. Usually you don't have to go through this step, but it's due to, well, our situation, especially how many days we've missed of school and being able to go out. But for now, it should work pretty well. So we'll start.
In this section, I am removing the weeds that had grown over the time my father had abandoned this plot. And these are really big weeds, and there's not that many of them. It only took about maybe 5 minutes maximum to get rid of all of them, just by hand. We didn't need to use a shredder or anything. But when you're starting, you probably will want to use a shredder, as there will be quite a lot of weeds. Unfortunately, in this clip, we were working right after a cyclone, so the wind was still pretty bad and you can't hear me, but I'm simply explaining how we plan to de-weed and remove the old mulch from this plot, and how using the rake I'm going to remove the top layer of mulch. Sadly, the wind continued, and in this clip you also can't quite hear me. So what we did after removing the top layer of mulch is add a layer of cardboard. So if you're doing this at home, you're not going to be having any mulch. After you've already shredded and aerated the soil, you're going to just cover that soil directly with cardboard. And as you can see in the video, we use this large concrete slab to hold down the cardboard so that it doesn't fly away. You're also going to want something like that. It can be an extra wooden plank, anything. Don't crush the soil. It just needs to hold it down so it doesn't fly away. And then you're going to want to let it be for about a week so that the cardboard can actually decompose. And remember, you are going to want to remove any plastic remaining on the cardboard. So that's all we did for this week, and let's move on to the next week. So it's been a week since we came out here during the cyclone and placed all the cardboard here. Now we have some natural compost, which was, well, not made, but my uncle made all of this in his backyard by just putting anything biodegradable into a little compost bin. And today he was kind enough to share some with us. And so we're going to, my dad is going off to go find some cocoa peat with a couple of workers. And once we get the cocoa peat, we're going to mix it with the compost and then put a layer of cocoa peat on top of the cardboard, and then we'll do the mulching afterwards. So hopefully today we'll get most of the work done, and then after this it's simply a matter of planting the plants and then letting them grow. So right now we've gotten wood chips for mulch. So this is the mulch we're going to put on after we've already mixed the compost and the cocoa peat. So after we mix the compost and the cocoa peat, we're going to put a layer of that on top of the cardboard. And after the cardboard is completely covered, we're going to put the wood chips on top, which will help with fertilizing the soil, retaining the moisture, and it'll also protect the soil. Yes, I realize how long this video is getting, but this is quite the process, and without such a long video, it won't be possible to capture all of it. So this is biochar, which is mixed with soil here, and biochar is similar to charcoal, except it's not as concentrated. So the point of biochar is that it'll help retain bacteria and water in the soil. So as you can see, these little bits of like wood, burnt up wood, are the biochar, and it's mixed with soil. So we're gonna mix it with more soil, and then we're gonna mix that with the cocoa peat in a few. So we have normal soil, which is right here, and these are the bigger roots in the cocoa peat. That's the biochar. And then this is the cocoa peat that we've broken down. This 3 bags worth of cocoa peat, 2 buckets worth of soil, well, more like 1.5, and then 2 buckets of biochar. So we're going to mix all of this up, and once it's done being mixed, we're gonna put the mulch on top. We're gonna mix wood chips and probably some of the dried grass from here, this was removed last time because it was too moist. Now it's dry again after a week of just sitting there. So we should be able to mix it with well, we don't need to mix it, but we can also use some of this for mulching if necessary. So that's it. So in a quick summary, this day is all about building the farm itself. We're not going to be planting anything. We're going to come back in a week and plant everything. And yeah, this layer is just cocoa peat. It took us around, I think, 6 or 5 bags to completely cover the entire area. The cocoa peat layer has been planted. Next up is the biochar soil. Right now we're taking a break. So I'm doing a voiceover for this section as well, but this is more due to my own honest stupidity. I didn't realize how loud the shoveling noise is, and you can barely hear me, but what we did is added rock sand or gravel, you can also use, to this mixture of the compost and everything, and this is to prevent air from getting into the soil. So the natural compost, which I showed earlier, is going to be a sort of NPK for the plants, meaning potassium and phosphorus and nitrates, which will help nourish the plants and give them all the nutrients, not macronutrients, but all the elements they need to grow. So we're going to mix it into the soil, cocoa peat, and rocks. Just put it all.
No, you leave it that up.
So we've put a layer of compost on top of the cocoa peat, and next we're going to put the rock sand, biochar, soil, and cocoa peat mixture on top of this. So think of this as the first layer of cocoa peat and compost. We're going to put a second layer that has soil, biochar, as well as more cocoa peat and compost. So yeah, that's it. What we're adding now is compost made by worms. So worms eat anything biodegradable, and when they excrete it, it's compost, which is extremely fertile, and it's going to help the plants get the nutrients they require to grow.
Come and film here.
So, yeah. So inside the soil, there are little worms. So on the side of this, the worms will dig into the soil and help the decomposition continue, and they'll excrete compost. So we've put the worm compost. We took two different types, a black one and a darker brown one, but they all have the same effect. The dark brown one didn't have worms in it, however, but the ones from the black worms compost should be good enough. So now we're gonna start mulching. So we're gonna take wood chips and we're gonna cover the surface of all the compost and everything in mulch, and then that should be it. And then next week we'll come back and start planting. So this layer of compost will act as the mulch. It's gonna feed the worms and decompose into the soil, and it's gonna help fertilize the soil as well as prevent weeds from growing. Final part of the process, at least for today, is to put the wood chips on top of the compost. So the wood chips will also feed the worms. They will retain moisture in the soil, and when they break down, it'll also become compost. Everything used in a garden like this breaks down into compost, because the entire point is to make the soil extremely fertile, since in the end you're never going to be continuously putting fertilizer every other week. You're just gonna, once you've done with this, you basically don't touch the garden. So we finished basically. Now all that's left is to water the mulch. We do need more mulch. We didn't have enough, but over the time I'm at school, we have a couple of workers that are going to come and just put the final layer of mulch on it. Right now I'm going to fill up a bucket
with water and dampen this a little bit. But other than that, that's it for today. And then next week we'll come back and start planting. That's it. So this is the final product of the day's work. We finished the farm on this day, and one step I forgot to record during that time was, well, not forget to record me doing it, but forget explaining, was to wet the mulch using water. So using a hose, a sprayer, or a bucket, anything, just dampen and moisten the mulch. It's been 1 week since we did all the mulching, the compost, the biochar, and everything. So after that, you can see that it did rain today, but most of the mulch is still wet, which is good. It shows that it is retaining a lot of the moisture. If you look underneath with all the soil, you can see there's some ants, and it's very, very moist, even under all the cardboard. So this shows that it's been mostly successful, and right now we're going to plant the plants. This is not a plant, this is a weed. It should not be here. So yeah. So it's been another week since we did the mulching, and we put all the cocoa peat compost, biochar, and rock sand. And actually the soil, and the proof of this is that it just rained and the mulch has kept most of the moisture. It's pretty wet. And then the soil underneath is also pretty moist. So yeah, it's not dry, which is a good sign, which means the mulching and all the cardboard and everything worked. So now what we're gonna do, we just have to plant the plants. The bok choy we planted last time, they have started to sprout relatively quickly, but they're not ready to be planted yet. So I'm going to start planting. So we have thyme, strawberries, chili peppers, eggplants, and a load of plants. All of these plants don't really need shade, so we're just gonna kind of plant them in the middle here, because they do fine in sunlight. If we wanted to, and we had plants that needed shade, we could plant them a little bit closer to the edge here, because when these grow over, they'll provide shade for them. Or we could also just we could also plant trees in here, and those trees would eventually grow and provide shade. But right now we're just starting off with small plants. When planting the plants, what you're going to want to do is dig a hole, take the plant out of the pot, and place it in the hole you make, and then make sure to press down firmly all around the plant. Make sure no air is remaining in the soil, because that will affect the plant's growth, and we don't want that. What we're doing now is planting potatoes. We chose to put them here in this corner because it doesn't really matter if potatoes are close to each other. As you may have noticed, while the chilies, thyme, and strawberries are quite close to each other, the eggplant has its own kind of box or perimeter. And it's probably hard to see on camera, but that's because when eggplant grows, it grows fairly large, so it needs a lot of space. Potatoes, unlike all the other plants we've done so far, you don't leave half of it sticking out, you completely plant it, and these little growths on the potatoes are what's gonna sprout into potato roots. Potatoes. Stuff. Yeah. When planting the potatoes, make it deeper than the holes deeper than other plants, but also don't make it too deep, but don't make it shallow.
Go.
So potatoes don't require very much care, actually. They don't need to be planted deep, they don't need a lot of attention. As long as you just kind of don't walk on them really while you're walking across your pot, they'll grow just fine. But what you do have to make sure of is that when you are going to retrieve the other plants, that you don't just end up crushing the potatoes yourself, because then you're not going to get any potatoes. So this is really it. This is all we need to do for now. We will maybe we'll come back and plant some more. It depends. Next week. But for now, that's it. We just wait for now. And then yeah, with time this will all hopefully eventually grow. That's it. That's it. That's the final day of making the farm. Now it's just watching it grow from here. You will need to interact with the farm, not very much in any other way besides making sure no diseases or pests are, killing your plants. Other than that, there's nothing you need to do. You don't need to water it. The mulch is there to absorb and keep moisture there. So from here on out, I will be showing you the documentation, I think around a month. I did catch COVID at one point, so there is a little bit of a time difference in between a couple of the recordings, but I will put dates so that it's not too confusing. So it's been 3 weeks since we were last here. I caught COVID in that time, and then the week before we were busy, so we haven't had time, but the farm has made pretty good progress. Over that time, my uncle and my dad did come here, and they planted a couple of plants that were dying, and the way we made the bed, they were hoping the bed could save the plants. But it's good. Most of the plants that were planted last time, actually all of them, are doing pretty well. Except this one, and I can't even recognize it. I don't remember what it is. But everything else is growing pretty well. The potatoes, I can't exactly check on those, but I suppose, again, with potatoes, all you have to do is hope, but potatoes can grow practically anywhere, so the chances of them not growing is pretty low. And as you can see, well, you can't show it on camera, but it's still wet, so there hasn't been rain here in about 3 days yet. Because of the mulch, the soil is still wet, and the plants are all getting their necessary moisture. And this looks small to begin with, and yes, it is. If you want to look over there, all of this forest was not made by my dad per se, but he planted many of those plants, and using permaculture created a forest level. And while what we have here is on a much smaller level, this is how you have to start. And if you keep going, you can eventually get to something of that size. But with my time frame, I'm not going to be able to do that. But this is still something to be proud of. And nothing's died as well, which is a good sign. So here we are on the final day of recording for this project. Unfortunately, I'll have to stop here due to my deadline. Otherwise, I probably would have added a lot more. But we're limited on time. And the bok choy still isn't big enough, especially with the weather right now. It's too risky to plant it, but outside of the school project, I'll still plant them eventually. And what happened was there was actually torrential rain and flash floods all over the island yesterday, April 2nd. And we actually were passing by a couple other orchards and farms, and we noticed how flooded they were. But if you look, while those giant orchards are completely flooded and destroyed, this little plot of land looks completely fine. And that's because not only does all the wood chips and cardboard and all the materials soak up a lot of water, but there are also little trenches all around this land, which force the plants to take the water up slowly so that they don't drown, and that the large amount of water also doesn't just crush the plants with sheer force. So as you can see, there hasn't been much of a change since last week when I came to record. That's to be expected. Plants grow unless you use chemicals, which is one of the things that the point of this project was to avoid using chemicals. But all of them, none of them have died. Even after I think 2 cyclones now and 3 torrential rains, not a single one of the plants on this plot have died. And well, this was already dead when we planted it. We were hoping to save it, but nothing much we could do.